Have you ever wondered what happened deep underground after the sun disappeared? When darkness covered the land, ancient people didn't simply stop living. For tens of thousands of years, caves became some of the most mysterious places humans ever entered. Not because they lived there every night. In fact, most prehistoric people probably slept in open camps, rock shelters, or temporary homes near the cave entrances. The deepest chambers were something entirely different. They were difficult to reach, completely dark, and often dangerous. Yet generation after generation, people kept returning. So what were they doing down there? The answer is one of archaeology's greatest mysteries. The first challenge was simply getting inside. Unlike today, there were no flashlights, no electric lamps, no glowing screens. The only light came from fire. People carried wooden torches made from resin-rich pine or juniper. Some cultures also used small stone lamps filled with animal fat. These simple lamps burned surprisingly well and produced a steady flame for long periods. Without them, even a familiar cave became impossible to navigate. Just a few steps away from the entrance, complete darkness swallowed everything. Your own hand would disappear in front of your face. Many caves stretched for hundreds of meters. Some required crawling through narrow passages. Others forced people to climb over rocks, descend steep slopes, or squeeze between walls barely wider than a human body. Reaching the deepest chambers could take hours, and leaving was just as difficult. So why make the journey? One clue comes from cave art. Some of the world's most famous paintings were not created near cave entrances. They were painted deep inside places like Lascaux, Chauvet, and Altamira. The artists carried light, pigments, and tools into chambers that almost nobody would casually visit. They painted horses, bison, mammoths, deer, lions, rhinos, and mysterious symbols. Some walls were visited again and again over thousands of years. This tells archaeologists that these places mattered. The paintings were not random decorations. They were created with planning and intention. Exactly why remains uncertain. Some researchers believe they were connected to hunting rituals. Others think they represented spiritual beliefs, storytelling, or important traditions passed through generations. The truth is that nobody knows for certain, but everyone agrees on one thing. People invested enormous effort to create them. Caves also changed the way people experienced sound. Modern experiments have shown that certain chambers produce powerful echoes. A single voice could bounce around the walls for several seconds. Clapping your hands could make it seem as if invisible people were answering from the darkness. Some painted chambers also happen to have remarkable acoustics. Whether this was intentional is still debated, but it is easy to imagine how strange these places must have felt. A flickering torch, moving shadows, echoing voices, darkness stretching beyond the light. It would have been unlike anything outside. Archaeologists have also found footprints left by children and adults deep inside caves. In some places, ancient footprints survived for thousands of years because soft clay later hardened. This tells us that cave journeys were not always made by a single experienced explorer. Sometimes groups entered together. In a few caves, broken torches reveal that people stopped along the way to replace or relight them. There is also evidence that fires were carefully managed. Smoke inside a cave can become dangerous. Without enough fresh air, breathing becomes difficult. People likely learned through experience which passages allowed enough ventilation and which areas were too risky to stay in for long. The underground world demanded planning. It punished mistakes. Not every cave visit was about art. Archaeologists have discovered stone tools, hearths, animal bones, and traces of human activity in many caves. Some chambers were used for short periods during bad weather. Others may have served as temporary shelters. In colder regions, caves could provide protection from wind and freezing temperatures. But the deepest sections usually show a different pattern. They often contain very little evidence of everyday life. That is one reason many researchers think these places had special purposes rather than being ordinary homes. Some caves even contain carefully placed objects, animal skulls, bones, stone formations that appear to have been intentionally arranged. These discoveries suggest that people sometimes left things behind for reasons we still do not fully understand. Perhaps they marked important events. Perhaps they honored animals. Perhaps the meaning has simply been lost with time. One of the most fascinating discoveries came from deep caves where explorers found handprints on the walls. People placed a hand against the rock and blew pigment around it, leaving a negative image behind. Thousands of years later, those hands still remain. Some belong to adults, others belong to teenagers, some even belonged to children. It is one of the closest connections we have with people who lived tens of thousands of years ago. Standing in front of those handprints today can feel surprisingly personal. Someone stood there in the light of a small flame. pressed a hand against cold stone, and left a mark that survived longer than almost anything else they ever created. The underground world also inspired imagination. In complete darkness, the human brain notices every sound, every shadow, every movement of the flame. Rock formations can resemble faces or animals. Dripping water creates strange rhythms. Even today, many people describe deep caves as both fascinating and unsettling. Ancient people almost certainly experienced the same feelings, whether they interpreted them as spirits, ancestors, or something entirely different. We simply do not know. That is where science stops. Good archaeology separates evidence from speculation. We know people entered deep caves. We know they carried fire. We know they painted extraordinary art. We know they explored dangerous passages. We know they left footprints, handprints, tools, and carefully placed objects. But exactly what they believed while standing in that darkness remains one of humanity's greatest unanswered questions. Perhaps that mystery is part of what makes these caves so extraordinary. Long before cities, long before writing, long before electricity, people willingly walked into complete darkness beneath the earth, not because they had to, but because something important was waiting for them there.